Up next, we have a conversation about the benefits and limitations of psychedelic therapies and the pursuit of expanding mental health care coverage. So please welcome this afternoon Rais of Anthea and Tatiana Torres from Denton's Global Advisory.
Good afternoon. We meet again. This is a new one for me, and I have to thank Matt for the opportunity with the team. So we're here to talk with our friend here about psychedelic drugs and the benefits that has for our community. So I'm excited to learn. Actually, I'm going to sit here, Sherry, and learn from you today. You're going to teach all of us a lot today, but I wanted to frame the conversation and take a step back. We were talking about this morning, the world we're going through a difficult moment now, and then folks are hurting, and it's a difficult time. And mental health has become probably a word or a series of words that we are all very familiar with and that we hear quite often now. I dare say that the lived experience for folks that we interact with that have mental health issues has probably risen more of awareness over the past couple of years than ever before. And accessibility and affordability for mental health services and provisions and treatments has become, even in Washington, D.C., a priority in terms of legislation and congressional members and other folks that are advocating for innovative ways that we could continue to make this a priority across society. Sherry, thank you for joining us, CEO and founder of Anthea. Thank you for the conversation we're about to have in advance. I know we'll all learn a lot from you. So Sherry, in January of 2022, when we were all kind of coming back to life after being in caves and homes and hiding with masks from this COVID-19 situation that we all went through, the New York Times published a piece, an article titled "The Promise and Perils of Psychedelic Healthcare." And in the article, there was a quote that popped out to me, and it said this: "There is growing evidence that psychedelic drugs operate differently in the brain than addictive drugs, and advocates have been consistently calling for legislation. But psychedelics remain expensive and difficult to gain access to legally unless you're a part of a research study for mental health purposes." So, taking a step back, let's set the stage here. Talk to us about psychedelics. What are they and how do they work?
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me. And I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot from you too. With regards to psychedelics, what are they and how do they work? Psychedelics refer to a range of compounds. The word psychedelics means mind manifesting, but there are compounds that take us to an altered state of consciousness. Some of these compounds have been around for thousands of years. There's evidence in paintings and archaeological evidence for the use, for example, of psilocybin back to 4,000 BC. And some of these compounds are newer, like MDMA, or more commonly known, recreationally speaking, as Molly or ecstasy. But what these compounds have in common is when they take us to an altered state of consciousness, they help increase neuroplasticity in the brain. And combined with therapy, so psychedelic-assisted therapy, in a clinical setting, not talking about using them at a party or in the forest or alone with friends, which may have some benefits as well, but talking about using it clinically and in a therapeutic setting, what we're seeing in clinical trials is that 65 to 85% of people in clinical trials will show at 12-month follow-up that they no longer meet the diagnostic criteria for the underlying condition that was initially presented. So to explain that even better, I may be suffering from treatment-resistant depression or post-traumatic stress disorder or severe anxiety. I participated in a clinical trial. I've been suffering from that depression or anxiety for years. I've tried multiple medications and therapy, nothing has worked. And in these clinical trials, we're seeing that after just 1 to 4 sessions of psychedelic-assisted therapy, which has very limited side effects, and these compounds are non-toxic, non-habit forming, so you can't get addicted and you can't overdose. After 1 to 4 sessions, at 12-month follow-up, I no longer meet the criteria for anxiety or depression or PTSD. That's happening to 65 to 85% of people in trials, and that's unseen with any other medications we're currently using or treatments we're currently using, whether it's antidepressants or talk therapy or a combination thereof.
Where are these trials taking place?
Yeah, so there are trials taking place in research centers in different countries, but there's definitely a lot of data and a lot of research is happening here in the US. NYU, Yale, Hopkins, Berkeley just opened a center for psychedelic science, Mass General Hospital, so these trials are happening all over the US. There are also trials happening in Canada, Israel, the United Kingdom. Australia has now approved psilocybin and MDMA, so they beat us to it, so to speak. But the data is very compelling, and what I'd like to add is that ketamine, which is a psychedelic substance as well, is actually already FDA approved and legal and available all over the US. And ketamine-assisted therapy also has shown incredible outcomes for patients suffering from a wide variety of mental health conditions, as well as substance abuse.
So Anthea you're the founder, right? Mm-hmm. 2 questions. Why did you found it, right? Why did you start this? And how is this professional and personal to you? How does this impact you?
Ooh, very good questions. So with the time we have, I won't go into a huge monologue. My background is actually in poverty reduction. So I spent 10 years consulting to the UN and the World Bank, and I was implementing poverty reduction strategies, usually at the national level in many countries in Africa, Asia, and South America. And what I saw from a decade of poverty reduction work is we can't fully address poverty without addressing mental health. And I saw this firsthand. I was in the field and on the ground. I worked in countries like Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, and I saw that even when we provided communities with access to basic healthcare, education, jobs, even forms of financial assistance, a large part of the population would come out of poverty and a large part of the population wouldn't. I'm getting to the why did I start Anthea? Okay. It's coming. I assumed, spending 10 years in the field, that if I looked online, I would find out what the West is doing to address mental health, and I would be able to implement this in a resource-constrained environment and figure out how to address mental health in a developing world context. I was disheartened to find out that we are not treating mental health well here either. And then went on a new quest of, well, how do we treat mental health? And I stumbled upon what was happening, these amazing clinical trials, all of the data around psychedelic therapy and ketamine therapy, and then realized that some of these medicines are not approved yet, some are approved. The ones that are approved, insurance carriers are not covering.
Right.
They're very expensive. People have to pay out of pocket. So I created Anthea to help people get access through employer benefit plans.
Okay. So give us a snapshot, if you can, in the time that we have. Where are we currently with these reimbursements, these coverages? I know that the American Medical Association has hinted at some sort of progress in this field, but where are we on reimbursements? Because that's, unfortunately, mental health issues or therapies, sometimes there is no reimbursement for that. So family members, parents, caretakers, individuals are paying out of pocket for whatever mental health treatment is needed. So where are we as it pertains to psychedelics?
Yeah. So MDMA and psilocybin, and again, more recreationally known as ecstasy or Molly and magic mushrooms, these compounds have breakthrough status by the FDA. So they're on a fast track to be approved. MDMA should be approved by the FDA in 2024. Psilocybin should be approved by the FDA in 2025. And ketamine, as I mentioned, is already approved and has 50 years of efficacy and safety records. Reimbursement is a very complicated issue.
Absolutely.
There are new CPT codes. These are codes that are used for reimbursement in the insurance industry for psychedelic therapy, which has been great progress. Those CPT codes were created this year. However, large insurance carriers are not covering ketamine-assisted therapy. So again, why I helped create Enthea was to create employer benefit plans so employers would have the option to offer their employees ketamine-assisted therapy as an employee benefit, so employees don't have to pay out of pocket. But of course, this is only a partial solution. We need major insurance carriers to come to the forefront of this. We need Medicare, Medicaid to cover this. We need the VA to cover this. So it's a much larger issue that I'm trying to at least start the way for.
All right, and so what employers or what industries do you see of employers that are coming to Enthea to look for this type of coverage and benefits for their employees?
You know what? I'm gonna answer that question, but I'm gonna ask the audience a question, and it'll show my answer to you in a second.
Okay.
I would like to ask the audience to raise your hand if you or anyone you know and care about has been affected by mental health at some point in their life. Okay, every single person in this room raised their hand. And so now to bring it back to your question, which industries? It's been really, incredible is not the right word because it sounds positive. It's a sad and inspiring at the same time to see that this has been industry agnostic. We have companies from every industry interested in offering this benefit. We have companies all over the US. We have companies with 5 employees to companies with 100,000 employees. And the reason for that is because literally everyone has experienced a mental health issue or has experienced a loved one or watched a loved one go through something.
Absolutely.
So it resonates with everyone. And something I didn't talk about that I think is important to mention is we don't talk enough about treatment-resistant populations. Sorry to use so much jargon, but we don't spend enough talking about how actually 50% of people with depression are treatment-resistant. 45% of people with anxiety are treatment-resistant. What this means is that no existing medication or therapy is going to work on them. And this is, super heartbreaking if you really think about that. And this is where psychedelic therapy brings hope because it's actually proven to be effective on the treatment-resistant populations.
So we know, based on the audience response, all of us, like I mentioned at the beginning, either have lived experience or are personally going through it or have gone through it or in the front lines of this issue. You indicated that, we had talked about this, meeting the individuals where they are, right? And a lot of mental health is meeting individuals that are going through situations where they are because sometimes those individuals can't get to the services. Enthea is doing that. What would you say to employers in terms of bringing that into their shop? How can they work alongside with you better? Like, what is the process that would have to go through?
Yeah, so working with us is not a difficult process, and I actually don't want to sit here and talk about Enthea so much. I'm happy to do that. You can check out our website, enthea.com, and we make it very easy for employers to offer this benefit. But I think what's really important, where it starts, the heart and core of this, is creating a culture in ourselves at the individual level, in our communities, in our companies, at the company level as well, at the country level, of really asking each other, like, how are you doing? How are you really doing? And if we start shifting our culture where this question becomes normal and it becomes accepted to answer the question honestly, so people feel safe talking about their mental health with each other, that's the biggest thing a company can do, a country can do, a person can do to help increase access to mental health services. First, let's recognize that this is an issue and let's talk about it.
Right. And talking about it brings vulnerability. Do you believe, and I know we were talking about this backstage with David and a few folks, do you believe that the psychedelics, and David asked you this, which was fascinating, what is it the same type of psychedelics that we used to think of when we were kids? Is it the same thing? Like, what is it exactly that we're talking about here? What was your answer? Because I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I said that, well, I think we talked about how much this has affected us, this advertising campaign of this is your brain on drugs, and this is your, with the egg in the frying pan, if you remember that.
Yeah, and the last slogan, if I remember correctly, was like, don't do drugs, or something like that.
So to answer your question, again, yes, we are talking a lot about psychedelic substances that were popular in the 60s and 70s, that were, some of them used traditionally for thousands of years, that then became popular in the 60s and 70s, and were actually in clinical trials in the 60s and 70s. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, so major research institutions all over the country were doing trials on these psychedelics in the 60s and 70s. And then the war on drugs became popular, and I won't do a whole huge history lesson here.
As a Colombian American, I know the war on drugs pretty well.
Yes.
Familiar.
Yes, then the war on drugs happened, and all of a sudden it was darkness. Every substance became banned. Didn't matter if it was already in a clinical trial, it became banned. And
perceptions too, if I may.
And perceptions changed. Right. But to get to the core of your question, I think, is this the same as what we think about when we think about psychedelics? Yes, but we need to reframe our thinking of we're talking about a medicine. So we're not talking, again, about going to the middle of the forest and tripping out. We are talking about a clinical experience assisted with a trained therapist to help get to the root cause of our mental health conditions and the root source of our trauma, to help increase neuroplasticity in the brain and ultimately alleviate suffering. And
in a controlled environment with a therapist.
Yeah.
Okay. Any key takeaways for the audience today that we haven't covered?
If you're interested in learning more, there's an incredible book by Michael Pollan called How to Change Your Mind. If you don't like reading, it's been turned into a wonderful Netflix special. Very well done. How to Change Your Mind on Netflix.
Gotta write that down.
It's very well done. And if you're more artistic and like visuals, there's another great show on Netflix, movie called Fantastic Fungi. These are wonderful resources. The other takeaway, I think, would be, please ask people around you how you're really doing. At the next break, ask people how they're really doing. And then finally, of course, if you do want more information on how to add this as an employer benefit, or you want to talk to your employer about this, or you know a company that might be interested, you can get more information at enthea.com, ENTHEA.
Sherry, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I learned a lot about you, but thanks so much for, again, joining us, and appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.